Interesting conversation there with the Minister of Education. And of course, a nation that doesn't have educated individuals can hardly talk about economic activities going the positive way, yes? Thank you so much, Ayo, Markwe, and Chamberlain for that. Now, I'm got to do business now for just about 30 minutes here on Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. We start from the global space as usual. Oil prices were set for a second straight week on gains, and that's despite edging lower on Friday as recent U.S. economic data boosted optimism over demand in the world's top oil consumer. Brent futures looked set for 1.3% weekly rise, while U.S. Texas Intermediate crude entries was also following closely at 1.2%. Looking at the numbers this morning, it's in the red 0.4%. That's for Brent, $80.74 a barrel. WTI, that's West Texas Intermediate crude, at $77.76 a barrel, and that's 0.5% in the red. U.S. retail sales, that data was expected yesterday, beat analyst expectations, while separate data showed fewer Americans had filed new applications for unemployment benefits last week, and that sparks renewed optimism around that U.S. economic growth. So still counting down to see if we would do that September cut by the Fed. A fresh round of negotiations have also started to secure a ceasefire in the Gaza war, even as Israeli troops continue their assault on the Palestinian enclave. These are the two factors that are driving sentiments around oil this morning. And then we come home to the Naira and keep our eyes there and see. We had gains yesterday. No intervention from the central bank, no auction yesterday, but yet we saw the Naira gain, a good one. And we hope that this is our way to stability. So we see that NAFEM went from 1,586 Naira 4 kobo, which is opened at and closed at 1,578 Naira 82 kobo. It's gained 0.46%. That's an impressive movement right there. While for NAFEX, it was more than 1%, 1.35 to close at 1,564 Naira 48 kobo. Do we settle here? Can this be a comfortable value for the Naira at this time? I guess investors will tell you what is most important is stability and certainty, and then we can now talk about the value. So, I mean, analysts are saying they see this being the level for at least some time now. And then also yesterday, the Debt Management Office has issued that Series 1 of the federal government's Nigeria's $500 million domestic bond to local and foreign investors. This was made known at the launch. The launch was yesterday. It was a hybrid roadshow for debt security and had in attendance, top on the list, the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edu, the DG of the Debt Management Office, Ms. Patience Oniha, the Group Managing Director of NGX, was eventually to head to the capital market, as Mr. Temi Kupola, as well as others. And this move, they say, is part of government's broader strategy to boost dollar liquidity in the country's foreign exchange markets.
Gathered at the historic launch of the Series 1 Federal Government of Nigeria dollar-denominated domestic bond are some top government officials as well as key stakeholders in the nation's financial market.
My question is on
the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edu, who is the keynote speaker at the event, says the $500 million domestic bond, which is certified as being lower risk, targets Nigerians, non-Nigerians residing in the country, as well as Nigerians in the diaspora.
There are Nigerians living in Nigeria whose savings are abroad. This is the time to back your own country. This is the time to buy a well-structured, profitable, safe, competitive investment rather than keeping your money abroad, provided to the Nigerian economy to create jobs and reduce poverty and support the program of macroeconomic reform and job creation that is now going on in Nigeria. That's what this is all about.
Providing further details of the offer, the Managing Director of Investment Banking at United Capital, the lead issue in-house, Mr. Gbadebo Adenrele, explains what the government intends to do with proceeds of the dollar-denominated domestic bond.
It will be invested in some key sectors, critical sectors, that will be approved by the President. So the President has to approve this, but this will be on the recommendation of the Honorable Minister of Finance, and this will be subject to appropriation by National Assembly. So that allows everyone to see that there is due process in this, and more importantly, it is ring-fenced. It's going to key sectors that will develop the economy and allow for increased revenue and, as the Minister has rightly mentioned.
In a question and answer session, the Minister affirms his optimism that this new bond will bolster confidence in Nigeria's financial markets.
It is our expectation, and in fact we are highly confident, that this first series of $500 million will be well accepted and received by the market. We expect it to be fully taken up, and we expect demand to even exceed supply. That's how confident we are in our system, in the talent of our financial operators, and also in the confidence that the financial markets and Nigerian investors worldwide will have in this particular issue of US dollar bonds domestically.
The issuance of the domestic dollar debt security, which is the first of its kind in the country, begins on Monday, August the 19th, and will be listed on the Nigerian Exchange Limited and the Financial Market Dealers Quotation (FMDQ) platforms at a minimum subscription of $10,000 in line with the government's 2029 Eurobond.
So that's it, an interesting one. And well, I think one interesting thing coming out from that, according to the MD of United Cap, is the promise that it will be purpose-driven and purpose-focused. And I'm sure a lot of investors will be interested in that. I think that's one of the reasons why Sukuk bonds are so well, efficient, if we could put it that way. So I guess the federal government, or led by the Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy, will have to show us how that's going to work, and that might be a strategy to get even more investors. As he said, we expect it to be oversubscribed and get more than the $500 million right there. Then another issue going on is the CMC, that's the Capital Market Committee's meeting. They're done with their second meeting for the year. The Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Dr. Momotimi Agama, shared some discussions from the meetings. Ms. Agama notes that there's been record time approval of 9 issuances worth 1.228 trillion naira in the midst of the bank's recapitalization. Of course, the banks have been very busy. Well, another area of interest for the DG is the 111% increase of net asset value that's managed by fund managers. And it says there's even more works that the committee or SEC is working on.
In terms of registration of market players, the bulk of capital market operators and sponsored individuals which had either been held back for some time now have now begun to receive registration. So all of our backlogs are being cleared, and new registrations are going to start taking place, as it should take place within the law and the regulations of the SSA. In terms of the unclaimed dividends, we are strongly working towards the resolution of all unclaimed dividend issues. As much as possible, it may be impossible to get it to zero level, but we know clearly with the strategies we are adopting, and of course the interest of the legislators and all parties concerned, we are making all efforts to make sure that that unclaimed dividend is reduced, not about its reduction, that investors actually who are entitled to those unclaimed dividends receive their monies as at when due. For those that are unclaimed, they are able to reach out to the brokers and everybody that's involved to get them to get back their money. For we, as a new management, we see that as a major booster to investors' confidence, and we'll do everything possible for investors to reclaim their money. We are going to set up a special unit at the SEC that speaks directly to the issues of unclaimed dividend, having to resolve those issues, because we discover that a lot of investors are having some minor challenges in trying to get access to those unclaimed dividends. So the SEC is setting up a small office at the headquarters and indeed probably at the branch offices, so that investors who have challenges of getting their monies back will certainly have a way to get it back seamlessly, and because that is very, very important to us.
Well, assurances there that perhaps in the near future, the issue of unclaimed dividends would be a thing of the past. Well, that's one of the words that the DG of SEC is promising us. Now, yesterday we had a bit of good news. It's been a while since we had some economic good news, but we saw inflation for July ease, and I think that was mostly unexpected. I don't think I really see forecasts from economists on that. Now, we see that headline inflation dropped. It dropped by 0.8%. And at 33.4%. Remember, this is coming from 34% to 33.4%. But when you look at that's compared to what we had in June, and then we also saw month-on-month basis. Year-on-year, it's still high, obviously, when you compare July of 2023 to 2024 base year effect. We still expect, because it was really high last year. So when you compare it to July of 2023 year-on-year, you see it's up 9.32%. Now, month-on-month basis, we see that for a month increase, it's 2.28%, and that's lower than what we had in June. June, it was 2.31%, so it dropped 0.03% when you look at June as a month and July as a month, 2024. We look at urban inflation, and we see that it's 35.77%. And it's 9.94% higher year-on-year compared to same time last year, while rural inflation is just about 8.77% higher compared to this time last year. So, but I mean, conversations I've had off camera on this, a lot of people have asked, so we see it has dropped. Prices are supposed to have dropped 0.8%, but no, it's the rate of increase that has actually reduced. But let's get a bigger picture, or a more realistic picture now, with economist and the Chief Executive Officer of CPPE, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Yusuf, good morning, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you.
So for the first time in 19 months, we can actually report that inflation has dropped in Nigeria. I wonder if we should really smile, because people are saying prices in the markets are not really reflecting this.
Well, I think it calls for some celebration, some cautious celebration, I must say. Just as you said, over the last 19 months, we have been seeing an increase in inflation. So for the first time, we are seeing a deceleration. I think that is good news. But what is important ultimately is to see the prices come down. Because sometimes people get confused with these terminologies. Reduction in inflation rate does not imply reduction in prices. Just as you said, what it implies is reduction in the rate of increase. So what the citizens are looking forward to is actually what you can call deflation. That is reduction in prices. And I think this is a very good first step. We are seeing a deceleration, and we are hoping that by the time we progress into the rest of the year, we begin to see a much more impact, especially from some of the measures that the government is trying to put in place with respect to, trade policy, reduction in import duty on food items, possibly also if we see an improvement in our refining of domestic refining of petroleum products. And of course, we are likely to see progressively a greater impact of the base effect on inflation. So from July, August, September, we expect to see a much more much more better scenario in terms of the inflation numbers.
Yeah, because even before now, there's the expectation that by August, I mean, I think a lot of people did not see this reduction in the inflation rate for July. They see it more in August because, even as you noted, the import waiver kicks in, started yesterday. So by the end of this month, we should be able to see the impact. That means that we should see numbers even cool further by the end of August.
Yes, that is what I expect to see. But again, we need to also appeal to the bureaucracy. Because it is one thing for the government to announce a policy. It's another thing for those policies to be expeditiously implemented. One is worried about the lag between policy pronouncements and policy implementation. And that is something that we need to address. Because this issue of inflation and cost of living is an emergency. We should address it with the urgency that it demands. We have seen the way the citizens have been reacting and all of that. So we need to be more expeditious in the way we address it. So I'm hoping that if the implementation is accelerated, we are likely to begin to see a reduction, even more reduction in the prices of goods. And don't forget, the trade policy angle or the fiscal policy measure that is being put in place is targeting more of the food component. And if you look at the basket of these inflation issues we are confronted with, the biggest component, almost 60-70%, is arising from food inflation. So if we're able to get a handle on that, I think that will help to further moderate prices going forward. And secondly, we are beginning to see some stability of some sort in the foreign exchange, in the exchange rate, even though the rate is still high. But I can see that the CBN is now not taking some interventionist position to ensure that we keep the rate within a particular band, 1,005, 1,500, 1,006, which is also good. I think that will also help in the moderation of the inflation situation. And I'm also getting reports that even the security situation in some of the agri-producing areas are also getting better, which means that with the efforts of some state governments or some nationals trying to support agri-production, we're also likely to see an improvement because the reduction we are beginning to see also has a seasonality component because we are beginning to see some reduction in some of the prices, particularly tomato, pepper, onions, and so on. It's not just a reduction in the inflation, it's actually a reduction in price. So we expect that to be replicated across all the food segments and other sectors of the economy going forward.
Yes, I think you touched on, and the next thing I would like for us to look at, which is the seasonality of it, because we know one of the reasons we're seeing a tapering of prices, especially the perishables, is that it's harvest period. And so we also know even that this import waiver season ends in December. So, I mean, it begs the question, what are we doing behind the scene to prepare us for after this bountiful season that we're having, both the harvest and the import waiver?
Well, I think what we need to do a lot more of is to ensure all year round, farming. Because for so many years, we have been hooked on to this rain-fed agriculture, where you have your harvest, you planting during rainy season, where it is the weather or the climatic cycle that determines the way we farm. We should migrate away from that to ensure that we have all year-round farming. And that can only happen if we invest a lot more in our water resource development. In other words, ensuring that the use of irrigation is much more, is much more upscaled, so that all the year round people can farm. I think that for me is very critical. And also leveraging technology. I know that there has been a lot of debate around this GMP and all of that, but we need to interrogate that a lot more to see how we can infuse a lot more technology in agriculture. Because that is what is happening all over the world and across all sectors. Technology is changing the face of every sector. That should also happen in agriculture. And we expect the subnationals to also be to be up and doing as far as agricultural production is concerned, because they have even bigger role to play, in agri production than even the federal government. They are closer to the farmers. They have more responsibility in terms of land. They are the custodian of the land and all of that. And they also have, the responsibility of providing some critical inputs, even to the farmers, like machineries, like harvesters, like agrochemicals, and all of that. So while the government is dealing with the fiscal policy components of agri-production and agri-productivity, the subnationals have to do a lot more with physical involvement to support those who are in agriculture. I think for me that is very critical.
Yeah, other than agriculture, we know the issue of transportation, energy costs also contributes largely to these inflation numbers. I wonder if you see that also tapering in the coming months.
Well, with the promise, or with the expectation that our domestic refining of petroleum products will increase, hopefully in the next 1 or 2 months, that should help to bring down energy costs. And with the promise by government that at least some concessionary terms will be given to domestic refineries in terms of purchasing the crude in Naira and all of that, if we're able to upscale domestic refining, first, there will be less vulnerability to exchange rate shocks. We see what is happening geopolitically now. We are likely to see a much higher increase in crude oil price, which often lead to higher domestic energy costs. So if we're able to be shielded from that as a result of increase in domestic refining of petroleum products, we're likely to see some stability in terms of energy prices. I think that for me is very good. And if we're able to also increase the domestic refining, we are likely to see less pressure on our foreign exchange reserve, on our foreign exchange market, which will help to also stabilize the exchange rate. And because exchange rate is also a very critical factor in inflation. So if you have that pass-through effect through the reduction in importation of petroleum products, stabilizing the exchange rate, that will also have an impact in inflation. Because both inflation and energy costs are very critical factors. Both the energy cost and the exchange rate are very critical factors in the inflation situation. So I think the outlook is looking positive in my view. We're able to stay the course and pursue all these policies conscientiously, and also ensure that the intervention from the fiscal policy side are also done in a very transparent manner, so that we will give concessions of importation of this thing to companies that really have the capacity to make an impact. You don't want these things to get into the hands of people who will now be looking for a third party to go and import these things. I think that should not happen. So I think we are on course, to reversing this very challenging situation of high cost of living.
Yeah, well, talking about energy security there, we were told that the Port Harcourt refinery would begin operations this month. But, okay, we're just in the middle of the month. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but it seems it's gone a bit quiet in that aspect. Also, of course, we're expectant from Dangote refinery, also PMS. Was another promise coming from there. I guess if we could have products from these two domestic refiners, as well as the modular refineries who have been working behind the scene. Also, I guess, as you said, the pressure on FX might reduce and we might see better numbers for the Naira.
Yes, of course. Because the beauty of domesticating or localizing refining is, one, reducing the costs arising from importation. Because the cost of importation is influenced first by the high crude oil price, second by the exchange rate. So we localize the refining and production of petroleum products, that component will be out of it. So that helps to bring down energy costs. Then there is a macroeconomic impact through the exchange rate. Because the less you exert pressure of importation on the foreign exchange market, the higher the prospects of stability in the foreign exchange market. The higher the prospects of the Naira even gaining a lot more strength. So it has the prospect of improving the macroeconomic environment, particularly through the exchange rate, and also it has the prospect of reducing energy costs. And those two variables are very, very critical, to stabilizing the economy and reducing and moderating the current temperature as far as cost of living, inflation, cost of production, cost of transportation is concerned. So the impact will be very, very profound and very significant.
Yeah, we look forward to the days of energy security in the country. Thank you so much, Chief Executive Officer of CPPE, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Well, we do hope that by this time next month, when we have inflation numbers, we would also have a cause to smile or celebrate, but more importantly, that it reflects in the price of commodities and goods, out there. Now let's do a little bit of market review from yesterday's trade before we head back to the Sunrise Daily Studio. It was still a negative trade at the close of the market yesterday, first day. We saw that the oil share index dropped 0.10%, and it's hovering around 55 trillion naira. It's a thin line right there with the 55 trillion naira, 55.1 trillion naira. The market lost 56 billion naira at the close of trade. The activity chart was very red yesterday. I mean, even during the intraday conversation, and our analyst warned us ahead of this, said it was a very quiet day. And so I guess we shouldn't have expected anything less. So we see that value, volume, and deals were dropped. The biggest drop was, however, with the value, more than 35%. Banking was able to recover a bit, but slightly. I guess not strong enough to move the market. Consumer goods was down. Industrial goods almost unchanged. Insurance also recovered 0.41%. Oil and gas also recovered. But unfortunately, these were not strong enough to change the sentiment in the market. Perhaps we can build on that today. We'll see at intraday. Top trades yesterday, versus CAP, Sterling, and ICO. For a second day now, we see ICO in the top trades. Well, at intraday, we would have to bring you, of course, updated numbers. The smaller market, the NASD, yesterday was recovered 0.37%. We see there at 1,481 for its index. Market cap at more than 2 trillion naira at the close of trade. A mixed color is what we see for the activity charts. Right there, stocks were 42, and that's about 20% higher. But a big value drop right there, more than 90% at the value to close at 113.49 million. That's for the unlisted market. But we'll give you fresh numbers at intraday. It's with you and I again later on at 1 p.m. Let's do it for Business Incorporated. But for now, let's head back to the Sunrise Daily Studio.